Well, welcome here, everybody. I think you know what we're doing here, and I'm very grateful for your support. Let me just say a couple of words of gratitude for this location and Liz and her family for hosting these events is really wonderful, and her sage advice in general, and being a good friend. And then to my family, Kate and Sinead over here. Steve, will you turn on my camera over there? I did not turn it on. Thank you. And I just want to thank, I've had so much support since announcing, and I'm very grateful for all of this. It's great. So I just want to answer again, why am I running? Why now? And I know some of you have heard me say this, but it's from deep concern. And in some sense, it's concern about the content of the votes, let's say, but so much of it is about the process. It's what happens in the meetings, how things take, the time they take, the animosity that we see there, and that's something that I would like to change, and I think that's something that we could change early on and almost right away with some important things, but we'll talk about that. So there's something that the paper used to do, host what's called the Brown Bag Lunch in Libby Park, and Agora, that I'm the director of the Agora Foundation, we decided to take this over last year, and we were about to have our Monday meeting with Ojai leaders and anybody else who wants to come, and we learned the news about the interim manager, Mark, quitting abruptly after a closed session. And it was that day that I decided we couldn't endure the way things were. So that's why I'm running. And what I want to do, I hope it's coming through, is nobody I know likes politics the way they are, the way it is. Everybody's frustrated about it and they're upset about it. So they're upset that somebody could have a differing opinion and they suddenly become a villain or an enemy. And we see that nationally and here. And so it's not brand new. It's been happening. There were people, for those of you who were here in, let's say, 2015 and 16, that if you decided you wanted to maybe have short-term rentals here, your friends might never talk to you again, or vice versa. That's how we've evolved. And what I want to do is not tolerate that. And I hope I can challenge all of you to not tolerate that and say, yeah, exactly. And so what does that mean, though? It's easy to say. What it translates into is being transparent about what you are going to do. I hope I've done that on my website. Will continue to do. Listening to what people have to say. And it means not personally doing it on Nextdoor or Facebook, but if supporters do that I'm going to do it, and I will challenge anybody who else runs in this race, that we talk to our supporters and ask them publicly not to do it. And I hope if you ever see me not living up to that standard, please call me on it, because I deeply want to do that, whether I win or not. If we could change the tenor of what happens here, I think it will be a victory. Couple little tiny things. I brought some stuff here on the table here right next to Kate and Sinead, and there, yep. One is just little bit of work I've been thinking about and working on. One is the amount of spending that we are doing as a city. So I just took the city budgets, looked at what the budget was, what the actual was. So that just means in your own budget, what did you plan on and what did it turn out to be? Usually it's more than you planned, as has been true with the city. But also the litigation costs over time have really skyrocketed in the last 5 years, and I think that's an important thing for us to pay attention to. And then for those who have a streak to want to get into the details, there's a 3-page written document there that is what I hope is a more detailed approach to building climate action into our other difficulties here in the Valley. So it's I hope flexible, it's conscientious, but that it works multiple challenges with the same solution. So I want to talk about John and Brenna for 1 second. I first met Brenna's mom in 1995 down the street. BST, who I used to work for, they started something called the Ojai Center for Children, and Vivian, her mom, was the director of it. And my daughter, Sinead, was 6 months old when she went there, and now Sinead's 29 right over there. So I've known this family for a long time, and I wanted to have a conversation with people who have raised their kids here, have a business here, they're invested, but they're paying attention, they're smart, they're interested, and they're not ideologically driven one way or another. So some people who have just a lot at stake, as most of us do. Sorry, there's a little fly here. So I approached Brenna first saying, would you guys be willing to interview me and we have a conversation about the future of Ojai? And she said, well, only if I get to ask whatever I want. And I said, of course, absolutely. So that's what we're going to do. And I'll leave it to you guys. Thanks for coming.
Well, thank you. That is true. I said only if I get to ask what I want, and then Andy followed up with, and I won't even have you show them to me. So just full disclosure is that these questions have not been previewed by Andy. These are questions that John and I came up with together. And then in the process, I think we realized that we totally think completely different. So that was a challenge. I mean, go figure. Anyways, we're John and Brenna. I grew up here in Ojai. We have been married for 20 years. We've lived in Ojai for the duration of that time. We've been in business for 18 years in Miners Oaks. We run the coffee shop called Coffee Connection. We've been super blessed to afford to buy a home in this town because we had landlords who charged reasonable rent and then decided to sell us a home below market value, which is unusual. But you know what? They totally deserve a round of applause. So thank you for that. That's a Soski family, actually, who he actually grew up here. Anyhow, that aside, we are raising 4 kids in Ojai, 2 of which are graduated. 3 of our children, though, work at businesses in Ojai. One of those belongs to us, and the other 2 are working downtown. And, it is just so apparent to us that the likelihood of our kids being able to live in the town that I was raised in is so incredibly slim. Can they find jobs? Yes, there's retail jobs, there's service jobs. Yes, they were able to find jobs, but the likelihood of them staying in the town where 4 generations of their family live is very slim. So when Andy said, hey, will you ask these questions? Yes, we do pay attention. We are in constant conversation about politics. Largely, that is a huge interest of John's and also of mine. But again, John is from England, as you will find out shortly by his accent. And so talking politics is actually very fun because it's not as polarized there as it is here. Maybe more so, but generally, maybe more so than it was in the past. Okay, so we're going to start by breaking the ice here.
Can I mention one thing I forgot to mention?
Yeah.
There's no cards on the table, and also Kate over there has more note cards and pens. And if a question occurs to you in the course of our conversation, write it down legibly, please. And at 8:15, if you have a question, Kate will cruise around and grab the questions, and then we'll address as many as we can. Thanks.
I want to say one thing. We are not professional interviewers. So you might find that some of our questions are a little disjointed, but all of the questions were meaningful to us and things that we wanted to ask. So forgive us for that. We're doing our best. Excited to be here. So thank you.
I'm very appreciative.
Okay.
And there's going to be a lot of things as well. Good evening, everyone. There's going to be a lot of things that we may not go to that might be important to you. So as Andy said, please feel free. Write down on that card. Also, Andy, you are where and at what days? Is it Tuesday? And what times do you usually go there?
9 to 11 in Libby Park by the fountain every Tuesday morning.
Yes, so feel free to grab a coffee or just a light spritzer and walk down and see Andy, because one thing Andy is, he's very approachable. And so we highly recommend that. And we do appreciate this time as well. So Andy, we're going to play a little game to start with. I know yes, you like games. I like games too. It's going to be rapid fire, so it's not going to take long. This is not requiring you to take any brain power because you post a lot on your website. You're a deep thinker, so let's keep it light to start with. A quick fire round, and all you're doing is choosing either or. Okay? Sounds good?
Yeah. Okay.
No, it's...
Well, when you say either or, you mean I have a choice to say either or? What do you mean?
Oh.
Or this or that?
This or that.
Okay.
You can only
It's
choose
this
one.
or that,
There
yeah.
can be
Understood.
only one.
Okay.
Are you ready? Are
Yep.
you ready? Excellent. Here we go. Flip-flops or Crocs? There is a right
Flip-flops,
word.
absolutely.
Flip-flops. Excellent. Test the waters or dive in the deep end.
Dive in.
Crunchy peanut butter or smooth peanut butter?
Crunchy.
Zombies or vampires?
Wait, what was that?
Zombies or
Oh.
vampires?
To do what with? Oh, God.
It's only 7:35, man.
Vampires.
Vampires. Oh, there you go. Air guitar or air drums?
Real guitar.
I know, I've seen pictures of you. Silly hat or silly socks?
Silly hat.
Oh, you're good at this. Silly hat. Excellent. Tacos or burritos?
Oh, either. I mean, both burritos.
There you go. Netflix or Hulu?
Netflix.
Ooh, board games or video games?
Board games.
Salad or sandwich?
Salad.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Good answer.
Perfect. Great answer. So you may have agreed with Andy on some of his preferences, and you may have disagreed on some. You may continue to feel that way throughout this evening. This is just an evening just to get to know Andy. We can experience tension and be civil at the same time. We're not seeing much of it at times right now. It is important to know that these questions were curated by us, Andy, and Andy has not previewed them. Also, it's important to note that I cannot vote. I can't register. I am not a citizen. So before you throw lots of stuff at me, I wrestle with this thought. Feel free to come up to me later on and try and talk to me about it all. I'm feeling more empowered to do so now than ever. But yes, so I am not biased either way. So with further ado, we're going to ask Andy why you want to be mayor.
Well, you got the first
No.
one.
I've got the first one.
The question is, why do I want to be mayor?
No, that's not
Oh, I see.
exactly the question.
Okay.
Sorry, there you
I'll
go.
answer. Oh, I'll
Okay.
ask it. Okay.
All right.
So you have not been shy about your desire to see the mayoral position switch back to a council-nominated role. So what are your thoughts on seeking public election for a role you feel so strongly should be council-nominated?
Did everybody hear the question? Yeah, just for anybody who doesn't know, there was the California Voting Rights Act, which took what we had done as our city was if you had, let's say, 3 council positions open and you had 4 or 5 people running, the top vote getters would get the positions, and it would not be by districts that we have now. So all municipalities, et cetera, moved into these districts, which nobody here asked for or wanted. And so in 2022, we had Measure M on the ballot, which said, so I'm paraphrasing, that the city council at their discretion would move away from the districts and to an at-large voting system. We voted for that by 55%, and presumably we would be doing that for this election, but we're not doing that yet. And what I'd like to do is work with some of the agencies that have sued cities that wanted to go off of the district voting and get some public comment saying they never intended this for a city like Ojai of 7,500 people. For Los Angeles, makes perfect sense. For any big place like that that has very different views in different areas of their location, that makes sense. Not for us. My shorthand is North Fulton and South Fulton have the same issues, and they're in 2 districts. That's the point. So, no, thanks. But what I think's happened is, and this is segues into civility and what I hope is teamwork. That the mayor right now is elected citywide and all of the council people in their district. Yeah. So the mayor, not this mayor, the position, has a mandate in some sense of saying, here's what the city as a whole wants. And I'm afraid the mayors have acted like that since we moved to this system. So what I'd like to do is say, what we are missing is a team. If you go to any council meeting, what you'll see is that there's basically 2 teams and 1 person that switches more or less. And to make there be a team, I would like to revert back to the way it was, which was the council, among the council, they would elect the person to be the mayor for that year, which was essentially formal, meaning they would drive the meeting. They're not driving the agenda. But in the meantime, I've tried to say, Mayor, when we met, can you unilaterally not put things on the agenda? That creates a lot of division. We've seen that many times. And she didn't take my advice, but there's a lot we could do in the meantime that I promised to do, and I will do right away. So essentially, I'm trying to say my first interest would be to get myself out of the mayor job and be back on the council job. And that would be among us again, and whenever we could do that. Thanks.
Now, is that what you're talking about on your website? I highly recommend anyone who hasn't been yet, feel free. It covers a lot of things, and it's a real meaty website with all the information. Andy Gilman for Ojai.com. And now you're talking about that, about the irony is you want to be voted for mayor to literally just step down from the mayorship, as it were. Is on the website it talks about this, like, Ojai needs a reset, and that is why you're running for this if you're elected. What is the first step you would take to reset? Is it to say, okay, day one, 7 o'clock, or what time, 6 o'clock, you start the meeting and you're like, okay, guys, this is what I'm proposing. How does that look to you? Like, just the baby steps for this reset.
That's a really great question, because what you hear sometimes when people are running for anything is they use big words that everybody will agree to. For example, we've got to end the division. Who doesn't agree with that? But what does it look like?
Yeah.
So what I tried to do, I call it the unsexiest part of the website, which is what I like to do first is procedure.
Yeah.
And so that's in our power. We can do that right away. So one would be meeting with everybody individually, because I've agreed with every single person on that council, and I've disagreed with every single person on the council, once or twice. And what I'd like to do is express my interest in building trust with everyone, and I hope I would show that by my behavior. But some things that I would like to initiate right away would be, and again, these are all listed. You can look for yourself. No need to write anything down. They never finalized or even delved into an ethics protocol or an ethics procedure. And so we all agree there were some serious problems. I think that needs to be done right away. Some behaviors that we all agree upon. Yeah, you don't have to clap. I mean, we all get it. It's really challenging. Secondly, there are some procedural things about how the meetings just literally go. For example, as was pointed out, I wouldn't unilaterally put anything on the agenda. I would always try to seek other people and feedback to put things on the agenda. I think the meetings go on too long. I wrote that in the paper. So I would like to say at 9 o'clock, it takes a majority council vote to extend the meeting 30 minutes. And every 30 minutes, take another majority vote. Now, I'm going to say something that I do not know all the details of. Personally, I would prefer to meet every Tuesday and have the meetings be shorter than every other Tuesday. If I understand correctly, that is some difficulty for the city staff. But hypothetically, I would like to meet more frequently and less long. Because by the time it's 11 o'clock, I don't actually care that much what they vote on. I just want to leave, and I'm not even doing the voting. But so in that first period of time, though, what I'd also like to do is say, we have to have a workshop that is public and say, what are the 6 or 8 things that we think are the big strategy points that we need to work on? We all know kind of what they would generally be, right? It'd be housing, et cetera. So we would look at those things, and they have that. But what I want to do differently is have those 6 or 8 things on every single agenda. They're always there at the end. And when somebody wants to bring something up for us to work on, I want to ask which one of these 6 or 8 things needs to go away to move this into. Sometimes that might happen, and that's okay. But I want to keep focused on this thing and work strategically so that we can do these things that we care about without, in my opinion, being interrupted with taking time to things that are much smaller or, in my opinion, outside of our business area, such as the ceasefire resolution. I thought was so challenging in so many ways, and I'm happy to say what I think about that. But so building trust and building procedure first off right away, I hope would get something. And last point, if you've watched any meetings, there are these kind of serial monologues. And if you go there and you speak, it is so difficult because you have to say what you want to say in 3 minutes. That is extremely challenging. At the same time, I've been on boards where 50 people want to talk. And you say, everybody gets 3 minutes. You just count the clock. And you go, we're going to be here for a while. Okay. I'm not saying I want that. But what I am saying is I would love it if people had more opportunity to speak. That could be every issue that we think is going to have enough audience. It gets its own workshop without a decision at the end. In other words, at Kent Hall, on a weekend or whatever we decide, here's 3 hours to talk about this thing that's not going to have a vote at the end where people can speak longer. But I would like the council, instead of having serial monologues, which they mostly know how they're going to vote, like part of me, I kind of want to say, why do you have to stay here for an hour? Just, you know what you're going to vote on, just vote, is to actually have a conversation. So if you were on the council and you brought up something, I'd like to be able to say, oh, wait, help me understand. Like, we actually are talking. Help me understand where you're coming from. I want to understand. And if somebody says something that maybe is logically inconsistent, I'd like to in a friendly way, press and say, it seems like this is inconsistent with what you said a minute ago or something, so that we actually deliberate in public. Yeah. So I hope all those things can get us, that would be our first start, is how do we start building some camaraderie and trust and work as a team?
And that's great. And
Right.
after your monologue right now,
thanks. I'm going to go shorter now.
no, but it just shows that it's hard. You say words like reset, and we can kind of all understand. We have an idea of what reset looks like to us. What reset looks like to you is a very practical sense of just how we conduct meetings, which the mayor, to my knowledge, has the power to kind of set those meetings up. But with that, it's all right you saying that, but you have, like, if you are voted mayor, there's going to be 4 other people on that board and the city council who may interject, and they have, unfortunately, at times, and hence why meetings go on until midnight, or even when I open the coffee shop at 5 a.m. That said, good governance is something that has been mentioned by our current mayor as a basis for some of her decision making. And I think she's made reference to it before, when she's changed certain slots in the meetings. That has ruffled a lot of feathers at times. What does good governance look like to you?
Tell me if I answer in a way you weren't intending to stop me. On the kind of higher level, it does seem... Okay.
Just kidding. I just wanted to see if you'd stop. Just kidding.
Well, no, it's actually a really interesting question at every level of government. One is, does the representative simply vote what their constituents want in some polling majority, or do they vote their conscience or their experience? And usually it's some mix of both. In other words, they have access to things that maybe the public doesn't have, but you would never want to say, I know what's better for you, even though most of you don't understand what's best for you, so let me be the parent and help. No, not that at all, never that. So I guess good governance, and for me, would be reaching out to the community as much as reasonable and possible in a way to get not only buy-in, but information and insight, even wisdom, into the things that the council is trying to do. That is less expedient. That's going to be slower, but I think we absolutely need that. And what I've tried to say to them is, if you had a large portion of trust in the community, you could probably have as many closed sessions as you want, and we would give you the benefit of the doubt, but that's not the case. So I guess I would lean first off with transparency in every instance as much as I could, and involving the community as much as I could, and trying to, I guess, walk the talk by being consistent and explaining myself. I do think this, leadership drives culture. I absolutely believe that. And the culture that is in the council, among the council people, and what we are feeling, it's not one person, obviously, but it is our leadership team, and that things have gone on this way, so most of us do feel concerned, whatever side we're on, if there are sides like that. So I guess good governance, first off, would be being as moderate as I could be, trying to listen as much as I can, and being consistent.
I have a question about that. How much do you think good governance has to do with procedure? Because I hear you talking a lot about sort of substantive, like how you're going to listen, how you might engage with the public. How do you weigh good governance or procedure in with that?
Yeah, I think the procedure is, it's in a way, it's the structure that helps us be our best. That's one way of thinking about what procedure does. So the procedures are there for a reason, like Robert's Rules of Order. You might come to the meeting thinking, why are they being so formal, or why are they calling each other by their last name? There are good reasons for it. It keeps you civil. So I understand those, and those are good. But there are a few procedures that I would like to dramatically change, which we just talked about. At the same time, I'm sure we all know people who are being perfectly polite, perfectly by the book, but disingenuous. In other words, they're playing by the rules, but there's dishonesty, but not so blatant that it can be called out. And so, that I'm not, we all can do that. So what I'd like to do is not do that at all, and be completely plain and straightforward, And then I really do believe this. Anybody who has been to an Agora seminar knows this is kind of one of the main things is the word dialogue. It literally means sort of like through reason or through talking. And so it's somebody comes along and you basically say, we have goodwill. You make the assumption the other person has goodwill, and we're going to try to find the truth together through talking. That's what dialogue means. And so I hope I can help build that by modeling it.
Okay, I like it. So what do you see as a mayor? Okay, yes, we have time for that. What do you see as a mayor's primary role? Like, of all the roles, what do you think is the most important? Like, could you distill that down to a paragraph?
I've never thought about it the way you're asking it before. Because you could say, one thing you might ask is, what do you spend most of your time doing? That's one way of answering the question. The other is, when the worst happens, what's the most important part? The worst happening would be safety.
Okay, I can be more specific.
Okay.
Okay, what do you see as a mayor's primary role as part of the council when it comes to being part of that group?
Well, I hope is what I'm endeavoring to do is to say that I'm part of the team.
The team.
Okay.
Yeah, so that would be one. But in the community in general, it would be part of the larger team, but being entrusted to say, you are going to decide these things in the council with other people. I mean, that's the reality of it. So to try to be as conscientious as I can be and as thorough as I can be is what I will intend to do. But I will just to say, be clear, I hope whoever becomes the mayor, that's those big strategy things, like keeping your eyes on the prize. And again, I can name what my 5 or 6 would be, and they're probably very similar to yours, but it's that we keep on that. And so obviously we have this unhoused situation right now that has to be resolved. Even if you decide, I don't want to build anything, we have to do something.
Yeah.
And so that's a short-term thing that has to be acted on, and that would be the biggest thing for whoever's stepping into this office, for example.
So these are yours.
There are over 5,000 people registered in Ojai, proper to vote in Ojai. I am not one of them. But only the last election cycle, only 3,600 voted in our local election. The mayor's race was won by only 42.
That's right.
What do you think keeps citizens in Ojai out from what keeps them out Ojai from voting? Is that what? I can't read your writing.
What keeps people from
I know,
voting?
my
Yeah,
writing's
what keeps them
terrible.
from what like says forget it. It's November. I'm just going to sit home and watch my Netflix like Andy.
That's why you
I
asked
hope
that
it's a good
question.
show.
Yeah. Well, there's got to be many answers to this question, right? Actually, our voting percentage is higher than normal.
That's true.
So we do have actually, James Vega, when he was here, he said, the city managers all get together locally and meet. And he said, yeah, we have a very active population. That's good and also challenging, which we all can imagine what that would be like. But I can only speculate what it would be. I can imagine in some case it would be you feel unheard or without representation. So that's one way I would say. The other is if reading is a difficulty or reading English is a difficulty, I hope that's become even more accessible. I don't know who didn't vote. I don't have that data, but I will just say one thing related to this. If it's true that lack of empowerment is a reason, one thing that I would hope is, and I did write this in the Ojai Valley News, which is everybody who won in this last election won by dozens of votes only. Yeah. And so even if that is still not, even if it's not the case and somebody were to win by a lot, I hope what you would do, but especially if you win by 42 votes, is you would realize I've only got half the people here on my side, so to speak, so I better be working with the other half in mind because I'm their representative too. Yeah. So if it's empowerment, I hope that we can demonstrate through our activity that, people ask me, can you say in one thing or in 2 words, 2 phrases what you are planning to do? And I said, goodwill and compromise. Goodwill and compromise.
I'll take that.
Okay.
Would you do anything to encourage more voters, or do you feel like, no, I'm just going to wear T-shirts, I'm just going to just put a T-shirt, and then every so often put a meeting like this. Like, do you feel like there's something that mayors in the past have failed to engage with?
I don't know the answer to the last part.
Yeah.
But what I could say, actually, somebody gave me the idea. When I begin my door-to-door campaign, which has already begun, is bring voter registration sheets.
Yeah.
And I thought, thank you. That makes perfect sense. So I hope that through that. And actually, I disagreed with some advice that I received because it's practical. I said, well, my intention is to knock on every single door in Ojai, in the city of Ojai, between now and November. And even seasoned people have said, why don't you only knock on the doors of registered voters? Why waste your time? And I want to knock on every single door.
Well, there's probably many people here who would like to support you in that as much as possible. So
Thank you.
The deadline for filing papers is fast approaching. How likely do you think it is that you will run unopposed?
0.
Yeah.
So you think someone's holding their cards close to their chest?
Well, the paperwork only came out on Monday, so they haven't been holding it close to their chest very long. I decided to, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't recall anybody announcing that they were intending to run as early as I did in March, but truthfully, it was because so many people were so concerned, and I thought, okay, I want to do this thing. But I have no idea, nobody has announced, but I'm expecting, I'll just be honest.
Yeah.
I did have a dream that nobody else ran, and that the only people who I thought probably will run came to me in the dream and said, Andy, Ojai Ojai needs you now. Like, I want to support you. Now, of course, that's like a wish dream. No, not going to happen.
Now, but would you prefer that, or would you like to have that mental sparring with somebody? To iron sharpens iron, as you said earlier with the last one. You know, the last man only won by 42. That is good for our community because then they have to acknowledge the 1,400 that voted for the other person. I know we'd like to run a race where we know we're the winners of, but is that good for Ojai?
It's not good for democracy to have an unopposed candidate. That's just the truth. So to have somebody that you're up against who can ask you the hard questions, that is just good for everybody. So even though I would love the dream fulfillment to come true, having another person would be better.
I like that. I also read somewhere it was the equinox or something, and is that why you?
No.
Didn't? Okay. Maybe I had a dream.
But our calendars are all about, astrological or astronomical things. So.
Okay. All right. So your website lists the nonprofits you are or have been affiliated with, the Chamber of Commerce being one of them. Simultaneously, you report that Ojai has an over-reliance on tourism revenue. How do you balance that assertion with support for tourist-based businesses that I imagine are part of the Chamber of Commerce?
Yep.
I list one such as the Ojai Valley Inn. They're a large part of Ojai's tax revenue. So how do you balance that, hey, we are over-reliant in this area, but I also want to support businesses?
No, that's a really good question because there's many aspects to the question. But the over-reliance on tourism, for anybody who's not clear on that, is the transient occupancy tax is about 30% of our city's revenue right now. So if you remember, during COVID, during the Thomas Fire, and during the Ojai Valley Inn's reconstruction, if you recall that, we felt what it was like to have that reliance. And the inn, at least this last time I looked, which was a while ago, the inn's TOT is about 50% of the TOT in general, so the rest is made up by all the rest. That's probably still something like true. But wanting to support a diversified economy for our valley is not really against tourism at all. It's more like saying, where I used to work at BST down the street, there were 60 employees there. We were all pretty well paid. We went out to lunch 2 or 3 times a week. And then we had 50 people remotely working that would come here and stay in the hotels when they were here for these conferences. And if you've been here long enough, you remember ITI was on this street and lynda.com. And so those kinds of businesses have just not been here. And now I don't want to make a blanket statement. These are anecdotes, but how difficult the city can be to work with. I'd like to change that whole paradigm, and it's in this paper, but, oh, thanks. Well, just the paradigm change would be when someone comes into City Hall that we see them as a partner or a potential for a partnership. And then it could be, oh, you want this. This doesn't work for us, but we want this. How could this work? And so on. So the diversification that I'm hoping for would be possibly through a commission or a commissioner, or and like in Ventura, there's the Economic Development Collaborative, something along those lines, that we are actively working to attract a business that we would like. Again, consulting, science, clean, not manufacturing, obviously things that we want. But it solves another problem, which is, and if you read the paper, you'll see this in detail, but the estimate of the number of people that commute in and commute out every day is incredible. So I see that as an environmental challenge, but it's a challenge of our own middle class people, middle income people, that so many people are leaving the valley to go to work outside of the valley because they aren't the professional jobs here. And then there's people that commute in who can't afford to live here. So if we can tackle both of those things, one, through more jobs, in other words, you live here, now you can work here, and housing that is affordable, you work here, now you can live here. So I don't want more tourism. I'll be really clear about that. The number of tourists are fine to me. It's fine. Like, I go downtown. I know some people say they don't go downtown on the weekends. I do go downtown. So I'm not opposed to it. What I'm opposed to is being so tied to one industry that if they suffer, we all suffer. So again, if we want, I've said this now, this will be like the 27th time. OUSD enrollment in decline for more than 20 years, and our median age by the last two censuses, 10 years, increased. Those two trajectories are just expected to go forward. So if we do not want to be a community of upper class retirees, then we are going to have to intervene. So doing nothing will mean that. So we can't just do nothing unless we want that. So I want to see more young families with kids that go to OUSD that work here, like you guys.
Great lead in to our next question.
Yes, great. And I've heard candidates in the past make note of a desire to work in collaboration with other agencies, specifically the Ojai Unified School District. Why do you think there have been roadblocks to building a truly collaborative relationship?
Yeah, it is a good question. It's something I do think about a lot. I do go to the board meetings, not everyone. I do like them, I'm friendly with them, and education's a big part of my career. When I think of the job market here and the housing situation here, I think of a triangle, and that third part of the triangle is OUSD. And it is that the decline in enrollment is in part because of the economy, no question about it. And if Cheryl was here, I would say it, as I've said it to her many times. The school can improve, and she would say that too. And so one of the ways that I would like to help it improve, now just to be clear, the city does not determine what the school teaches, just so everybody understands that. We don't decide what curriculum is, and I don't want to decide what it is. But what we can do is say, how can we be a partnership for you? And I did say this at the last, their board meeting, is some of you know, they're in the very early stages of looking at workforce housing for their staff there. And what I said there, and I'll say it here, is I would like the city of Ojai to say, we want to be a partner with you explicitly and ask, how can we help you with this project to find the best solution for Ojai? Now, does that mean that the pricing goes down for the units that are there? That kind of partnership's what I'm talking about. It could be a financial partnership. I don't just mean that we are happy and have meetings together. But also, if you know Rock Tree Sky as one example, it's not for everybody, but it is a really wonderful self-directed learning program for those families that want it. And it has brought students to OUSD that wouldn't have come otherwise. So if we had 6 or 7 of those kinds of partnerships that the city could help with, and let me use the easy example here, and to me, writing helps me figure out what I think about something. But some of you know Joan Kemper and Mark Whitman and a whole group of people through OPAT want to have a performing arts conservatory over here downtown or somewhere. And I am so for it. And I think, wait, why aren't we doing that? You know, that becomes part of OUSD, that now OUSD has a performing arts curriculum taught by pros. And that would be a place that people might move to Ojai, not for the private schools or whatever, but for the public school someday. That would be my hope, that there's so much interesting curriculum that is attached to OUSD that the city could help with. Even Liz and I Liz and her mom owned Azu, if you didn't know that. We would be sitting in Azu, we'd look across the street and at OUSD, and we'd say, how cool would it be if there was a permaculture teaching garden instead of like the shaggy lawn in the front, and it became this place that, oh, you want to learn how to do permaculture, you come to Ojai and have your kids go to OUSD and learn all this stuff. So I would like to list out, and I'm working on it, what does a real partnership look like? It could be financial, it's semi-monthly meetings, it's the 2 and 2 committee, 2 board members of each side, and maybe their directors meet regularly. But again, I know I'm speaking so long, but I do think OUSD enrollment, I think about it the same way I think about water, in the sense of an artery that keeps this community alive. So if you want to have a future, we have to have an OUSD that doesn't shrink. So that means whatever we could do to help, I want to do, and they're prepared to improve their whole district. So, thanks.
Great. Okay. Last question. Beyond public comments at meetings, emails, receiving phone calls, how do you plan to involve all the voices that are represented in Ojai in the decision-making process in our town? And that includes some of our residents whose first language is not English. I noticed that your website is only in English. I also noticed that the City of Ojai's website is only in English. As a fourth generation family member of one of the first set of immigrants in Ojai, that's important to me that all demographics are represented. So including that also, I think another missing demographic here is also young families. They don't have time to come to events. They're putting kids to sleep. So how do you plan to include all of the voices into the decision-making processes in our town?
No, thanks. So there's several parts.
There are.
I'll just do the easy one first. On the Spanish part, somebody volunteered, a business owner in town, and I'm so grateful for it. So I hope to have that done hopefully next week. So there would be basically a link saying in Espanol, but then everything that I make, those little cards over there, there'll be a QR code that would just go to the Spanish-only site. So I very much agree with that. But I should have done it already. But there's a lot that you're talking about, and I want to extend your question just the tiniest little bit. The valley, there's so many people here right now don't live in the city.
Yeah.
And what I'd like to do is involve, and it's on the website, but have what I would call a valley-wide commission. And that would be one representative from Casita Springs all the way to Upper Ojai, so 7 people. We have to work on, how are they elected or whatever, but not elected, but appointed. Yeah. But then they weigh in on all ordinances that are in front of the council. So again, it can't be binding, but I want it to be influential. So I'd like to hear, and think about it, anybody who lives like in Miramani or whatever, you have to deal with all the tourist decisions that Ojai makes. They're coming through your town. I want to hear what you think about it. And I hope the answer is not just don't do it, but it's how can we do it in a way that's going to make it work, or wherever the question is. But so one of the issues, it seems to me, is that workshops become a regular model that you don't have voting at the end of the workshop. So imagine this scenario. There's a big issue. A lot of people are going to want to talk. Maybe there's 2. There's an evening meeting. Maybe there's a weekend meeting where everybody can come who wants to come. Childcare has been brought up in my life in the past, like board meetings that had childcare, for example. But then you hear from everybody with a longer time for them to talk. That's expected. So you're going to be there for 3 hours on this one issue without a vote that day. And then at the next council meeting, it's on the agenda to vote, and you're not rehashing it again. I'm not inviting everybody to come back and talk one more time. The talking's done, and then we deliberate there and decide. But I hope through several meetings like that and that model, I'd like to involve people in that way. And I'm open to ideas. If the Zoom meetings don't work for everybody, there's some other forum, I'm open to that. So as much as possible would be my answer. So the ways that I've just said are the ones that I'm thinking about, but I'm very open to more if you have some.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would love to see the city website translated into Spanish, or have the option. How there's a little click at the top into Espanol. That would be really meaningful.
That's super good, and we could do that right away. I hope they're listening and they've already writing it down.
I'm sure it's been brought up a multiplicity of times, but some people whose first language isn't English, they might speak some English but not be able to read it. So it's really important to create our forms and our information about our city and our candidates in languages that can be read by all of our population. So that ends our question asking.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
There's a lot of things that we haven't covered. People probably want to know about the housing and the homeless with the grants and everything. People want to know about what are you going to do about like fire prevention and all those things. We can gladly ask, but yet everyone has their slight difference on how to ask that question. There's things going around now. We're going to pick up some questions. Feel free. We'll ask them to Andy. Also on Tuesdays, feel free. It's super important that you get, the more you know, the more you know. And I think
Thanks. I'll give this to you guys.
Andy can't be everywhere. And if you really believe that Andy has a great vision for this town and this city, you are going to be that kind of mouthpiece. And so to inform people, Andy Gilman for Ojai.com. You have a lot of intentions on there that covers a lot of bases. So Andy, I just want to say thank you because it's not easy. I would never run for mayor right now. I can't anyways. But for those who've been in the past, we have Wyrick here as well. We've had many people who've been involved. You're all here, people here who've been involved in different parts of supporting our city. And I just want to thank you for it because it isn't easy. I've watched, sometimes with a glass of wine and popcorn, I have to say, watching the city council meetings because they are quite entertaining. And that's sad in one sense, isn't it? But yeah, Andy, thank you for stepping up. Feel free, people, to stick around. We're going to ask some of these questions and grab him afterwards as well. Thank you.
And I'm happy to go to coffee with anybody anytime that we arrange. So I'm doing several of those a week where I meet somebody for coffee and we talk through whatever they want to talk about. So anything that jumps out?
Okay. So building low-income apartments on Bryant Street. Do you support the idea? If not, why?
Low-income apartments on Bryant Street, if you mean Cabrillo, it's already initiated and they're raising the money, so it's going to be right over there. And it'll be 49 units and one managerial unit built by Cabrillo, who built the place on, if you go up Montgomery past Franklin, that on the right, and also we're part of the project on South Fulton over there on those houses there. But I'm completely for that. And if anybody doesn't understand that issue, the state has forced municipalities to take things what are called by right, meaning if they have a large enough affordable housing portion, then they have to be accepted with it unless there's a very solid reason to reject the project. And Ojai is not alone in stopping things from being built. And so that's why the state has acted. The last time I looked at a number, it said that the state is asking for 180,000 new units to be built a year statewide, and about 80 are being built. So they've leaned in to say, if a developer, for-profit or nonprofit, comes to you with a certain amount of affordable housing, they get certain exemptions by right, such as more density than your ordinance allows. That means more units per parcel size. It could mean more stories. So somebody like Cabrillo coming in, who is a nonprofit with a great track record to build these units, it's a slam dunk. They're working on grading the rest of the money, so probably it's 3 years out before we see that. So it's not the short-term fix, but I'm glad it's initiated. So that's that. Unless if they mean more, I would say if they're talking about zoning on Bryant, well, I'm not thinking of Bryant per se, but I am thinking about, and you'll hear me say this many times, but Whispering Oaks is a fantastic model, which is for older residents, and it's 30% of their income, no matter what their income is. We obviously need another one right away. So what I'd like to do first off is to say, we've met our regional housing numbers, but clearly we have not met our problem. Yeah. And so, and all those numbers to be met, saying they're all projects that are in the works, but I'd like to do my first thing, which would be is to work on a housing trust, build another Whispering Oaks, that is state subsidized, so that we can have a similar number of people there. And it seems to me that would solve some of the people that are at the encampment at Kent Hall. There's some people that would qualify to go to this new Whispering Oaks.
A great way to bring together ideas and experts on controversial topics is through advisory or councils or committees. I feel like you're going to be just full of councils and committees.
I
if
think
you
we
were elected.
counted 4 when we were going through your website, like at least 4 different committees
Yeah.
that you're like, I have this committee, this committee. So here's another.
Yeah.
How do you intend to bring about more advisory committees like on housing? And this is adding on to that question in one sense, so that part, how are you going to add that? And how do you streamline that at the same time without Andy just being stuck filtering through all these different advisory committees?
No, that's a really good question because it's something that everybody's going to have to be very cautious of. And when I say, I want to get everybody involved and I want to have all these committees, there's a reality factor there. But there are times when, for example, even in thinking of this encampment, me included, there was no community involvement, as we all know, and I don't have to rehash that. But if we said, well, what would the program exactly look like? Let's map out all the details. There are people who are so much more expert than me at doing that and have done it. So there is a time for experts to do what experts know how to do. But I would say having a community express itself on things like location obviously makes sense. What I do hope, though, and this is what that paper is going to lean into, is if we think of housing and climate can be the same problem set and the same solution. So there's a tremendous traffic factor and a building materials factor. So what I would like to propose is that there's a housing climate commission, in a way. So that's one commission. And that would be looking at things like, what would be the affordable housing projects that would benefit? We do a needs assessment that's pretty serious about what are the needs of the community, because I don't think we honestly know. We know anecdotes, but we don't know how many vacant units literally are there, how many people are feeling insecure about their home at the moment. Having that kind of data would be useful. So our solutions could very much overlap, it seems to me. So I hope, but I'm probably going to come to your place and say, there's too many commissions. Just like you said that day in July. I'm going to have to wait and see, but I'm going to lean more towards involvement with cumbersomeness until there's more trust.
Okay, next question. How can people that live outside of the city have a voice? Or how about business owners? How can they have a voice? People that live outside the city are impacted by what Ojai does.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that commission I just talked about, a valley-wide commission, is one way. So a lot of our agencies, I'm sure you know this, but if you think of Casitas goes all the way to Mills Road, all the way up here, and OUSD, the entire valley. So we have all these overlapping agencies. And I guess what I'd like to do, and I know many of them, and I'm friends with many, is really build a real partnership that we're actually working together and calling each other. Let me use a very easy example. When Ojai Day happened and Caltrans was working on Main Street, if you remember that, the day before Ojai Day. Now, I understand it's not the city, it's Caltrans, and if you're on Facebook, people get so upset about the city's not doing a good job tearing up the roads on Main Street. That was not the city. But if there were a relationship, it seems to me that call could have been made beforehand as a matter of course. That we're always checking on these things and we're looking at that. So I would like to build this place where there's a lot of agency overlap. As far as businesses go, I would like to, and I served on the chamber, and if Jamie was here, I would not say it differently, but I'd like to press the chamber more because they do receive money from the city. And I'd like to say, here are deliverables we would like to get from you. And I know because I was one of the people, representing them on their board in the past, but to represent businesses, to help. They do a very good job, I think, of helping a business do well here, but attracting a business, working with the city, they could do better. So I'd like to work in that way too. Also, I don't know what time it is, but I didn't set it. What time is it?
8:20.
Okay.
8:20.
Want to do 2 more? I don't know. I'll stay here all night, but you won't.
Okay. We will do 2 more.
Okay.
Okay. Since the beginning of 2023, when the new majority took power, many citizens and even fellow council members have requested setting up stakeholder committees or commissions on critical issues such as housing, homeless encampment, economic development, climate resilience. And so far, I think it says they ousted them all, or they voted them all down. As mayor, will you take leadership in setting up these committees?
I do
Yeah.
know the question.
Okay.
Well,
thanks.
there's one that happened right away, or most recently. So, and I understand some of the difficulty, but a budget oversight committee, which we have had for a very long time, and I understand the way that committee members are picked has to be very carefully thought of to make sure that there's a balanced approach. And I do want a balanced approach. I would like to have a planning commission that has people that never want to build another thing ever again, and people that want to build every single chance, and everybody else in the middle. Hearing all those voices is very good. But in this case and again, I would say this if the council people were here and if Ben, the city manager, were here. When Ben said to the council, you don't need a budget committee, you're the budget committee. Those were his words. I think that's a gigantic mistake. And for several reasons. One is they're not economists, for example. And they're not and I read the budget and it's daunting. And I've managed budgets, not that big, but to have a group of people who are expert at this that can look at the budget carefully and then don't have anything at stake. In other words, they could ask questions. How did this happen? Where did this money come from? For example, we had a budget reserve of 50%, and then Ben, the city manager, said, and I have the quote there in that paper, it said, through moving these non-operating expenses into this budget reserve, we're now at over 100%. So, and that's where we're at right now. Is in other words, we have a budget of $37 million. That's for paying all the retirement commitments and all that. Okay, but then $16 million is what we have as our operating budget. That's what we are voting on every year and looking at. We currently have what we had prior to this year. We had met a 50% reserve. So in other words, 8 million-ish or whatever is set aside for a COVID. And that's good. That's a good practice. What was told to us was we are at 100%, and not just 100%, but 3.2 million over that through these other funds that have been moved. So, and I don't mean to parody this, but everybody just got so excited about that possibility, and nobody asked, well, what moved? In other words, we didn't suddenly generate $8 million in revenue. So just tell us what moved. A budget committee could help with that if a council person doesn't feel, I will, but if they don't feel they could do that or should do that, which they should do that. So when Ben made that recommendation, I thought it was a complete mistake. I would say having a budget committee right away makes perfect sense. They can look at it in detail over time and make recommendations. Another is the way that commissioners are chosen. And so I'm glad I spoke and many people spoke, and I'm glad that not a unanimous vote, but what I wanted was that you had the commission, the chair of the commission, the liaison from the board, from the council, and the mayor, fine. They all had to unanimously agree on forwarding a new commissioner that the council would vote on. They didn't want to do that, and they wanted to have it be where each council person would appoint a commissioner during their term. And some of the council people have said they want people politically aligned with them. Now, they don't all think that. Some do. I think that's a complete mistake. I love forcing the unanimous vote at the commission level, and then that makes them compromise. And you get a group of people, again, that have the spectrum of views about what we should do. So that's where I believe the best ideas come out.
And with that, then, our final one. Okay. Talking about ideas, talking about earlier that you had dreams. What do you want Ojai to look like? And this could be like average ages, demographics, all these things. What would you like to see in 5 years? What's your vision, as it were?
I've been playing with what does it look like in 2040. That gives me a little bit more runway. But I guess not all projects could be accomplished, but many of them would be started. So in other words, there are housing projects that the city has initiated, for example, and Mark Whitman designs them or whatever, but we have very low income housing in a design that we want, in a location that we like for families, things like that. Those projects, if not already set up, have started in those places. If OUSD's enrollment were ticking up, that would be another thing I would like to see. I guess I'd like to see more harmony in the next election. That, in other words, we say, hey, we don't all agree. I'm sure not all of you agree with everything I said here tonight, but we have buck the national trend that we actually just listen to each other, and somebody with an opposing view isn't a villain or a traitor, just somebody with a different idea. And I guess if I do believe this, and you'll see this in the paper, but if we are not extremely prepared for another wildland fire, all the rest of it is kind of moot. So that's really our first biggest priority would be that. And so there's a lot of agencies working on it. We can't do much to prevent a fire, 30 miles away, but what we can do is, and I'm suggesting this, is we have financial incentives from the city to harden our homes, that we look very carefully, and I know this is going to be possibly controversial, but we look at our tree cutting ordinances, not the entire tree, but limbs over buildings. And we say, is this a serious fire hazard because it's leaning over the building? And I know none of us want to cut down trees, me included, or a branch of a tree, of a healthy tree, but I think we really have to lean into safety primarily on this wildland fire. Again, or we're just talking. But then there's some really practical things like the sheriff's budget is the second largest single line item. How much are we scrutinizing the budget? And Trina is awesome. I'm a total Trina fan. And the sheriffs in general, so I'm not criticizing that. I'm just saying, have we just carefully looked at the over $4 million budget for the sheriffs? Is it the best spend? Is it the right way? Most of us are saying there's e-bikes going crazy in town, and even if we make ordinances, there's nobody to enforce it. So what are we going to do? And we all have our own stories about that. But so I guess I'd like to see, we've looked at all of those ordinances pretty carefully. We've cleaned out the old ones. We revised the other ones to add the spirit of the ordinance is clear and not just the letter that's inflexible. And I hope we feel like we are moving in a kind of a direction that, if we could grow a little bit as a town, but I'd like to see that grow in a middle class and some tension with people that don't own their homes, or that Help of Ojai now is an agency that is 4 times the size, and they're regularly doing, rent help, for example. I'd love to see that. That's only a few. We can keep going. And we won't get them all. Some things will only get started, of course.
And that's okay, though, isn't it? And that is that vision, isn't it? It's setting that, and as you just said rightfully, it's those steps. We want to see those things. And we really hope we do, Andy. I really appreciate this evening.
Me or
so
anybody
much.
else.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.